Hi there, friends. I'm back again with another favorite author of mine. Her name is Patricia Polacco. I know that some of you have experienced me doing read alouds in your classroom to one of my favorite books, which is at the school. It is called, it totally spaced out of my mind. I know some of you can probably remember it. I can't remember the title of my favorite other book. Oh man, this is terrible. Hopefully I'll remember in one of my other recordings that I do. Welcome to getting old, kids. Don't ever get old. The next book that I would like to read for you is another one by Patricia Polacco, and it is called Mrs. Katz and Tush. Ooh. Let me see if I can see that better. There you go. Larnell didn't know Mrs. Katz very well, but almost every other day his mother stopped in to see her after work. Since her husband died and she's so alone, his mother had told him. Mrs. Katz held tight to his mother's hand the day they looked at an old photo album. "That's my husband, Myron," said Mrs. Katz. "He came from Poland just like me a long time ago. We had such a life, such a life." And then her voice broke. "We had no children, and I'm going to be alone for Hanukkah and Passover," she cried. The next day, Larnell stepped in to see her himself. "I've been thinking," he said. "A cat had some kittens in the basement of our building, and we found someone to take them all except, this one, and, she's the runt. And, nobody wants her because, she's ugly and, she doesn't have a tail." "Oh, ugly, you say," says Mrs. Katz. "My Myron was ugly too when he was little, but he grew up to be such a person." Mrs. Katz looked at the little kitten. "Scrawny little boobele. So smile, no tail," she said as she examined the kittens closely. I just don't know," she said doubtfully. And then she saw the look on Larnell's face. "Larnell, I'll take her," she announced, "but only if you will come and help me with her. Because, I've never had a cat before." Larnell promised. "A good Yiddish name I'll give her," said Mrs. Katz. "Let's see. She has no tail. All you see is her tush. That's it. We're going to call her Tush." Little Tush grew healthy and strong, and Mrs. Katz cooked for her, brushed her, knitted toys for her. She even read books to her. How many of you guys have read a book to your animal since you've been home? "Such a person," she'd say as she watched Tush play. Mrs. Katz was in love. Larnell, he kept his promise. He came and visited Miss Katz and Tush every day after school. There was always a fresh baked kugel and a tall glass of milk waiting for him. But as much as he grew to love Tush, he also loved to listen to Mrs. Katz talk about the old country and the way times used to be. "I come from Warsaw. That's in Poland, you know. I came here to work sewing dresses in the garment district for my cousin Moyoshi. I didn't speak one word of English." "Well, how did you learn how to talk to people?" "I didn't. And I cried a lot in those days. And then I met Myron, and he asked me to marry him after he tasted my kugel." "I believe that," Larnell said as he ate some more. "Myron and we used to vacation in the Catskills. A borscht resort, a place that Jews would go to stay." "You mean Jews couldn't stay anywhere that they wanted to?" Larnell asked. Mrs. Katz did not answer. Instead, she went to a trunk and pulled out some old clothes. "My grandma told me places she couldn't stay either," Larnell said softly. "Larnell, your people and mine are alike, you know. Trouble, we've seen. Happiness, too. Great strength we've had. You and I, we're also alike. So much alike. Now, where was I? Oh, yes, the Catskills. The Catskills are a range of mountains on the East Coast, by the way, on the East Coast of the United States. We used to dress every Sunday and we would have a costume ball, said Mrs. Katz. And then she put a record on the record player. It was old and very scratched. Record players. Ask your parents about it. You hear that, Larnell? That's what we used to dance to. It's a dance from my homeland. Here, let me show you. They whirled around the room, they laughed, and they giggled. As the weeks passed, Larnell spent more and more time with Mrs. Katz. Since you're almost family to me, Larnell, she said one day, I want you should come with me to say Kaddish for my Myron. I know you're not Jewish, but Myron would have liked you. You're such a person, Larnell. At the cemetery, she read from her book, and then she asked Larnell to put a small rock on top of Mr. Katz's headstone. We do this to remember, she said softly. Shalom, my Myron. She murmured and wiped tears from her face. On the way home, she announced, Kugel, such a kugel I baked for you today, Larnell. Hurry, Tush is going to be worried for us, she said as they walked. When they got home, they called for Tush, but she didn't come. They looked everywhere for her, and suddenly Mrs. Katz gasped. The window to the fire escape was open. Oh no! I forgot to shut the window before I left. Poor Buble. She's never been outside. We're going to find her, Larnell tried to reassure her. She has been acting strange lately, Mrs. Katz said through her tears. She's been trying to get out, but I was afraid that she would get hit by a car. I'm going to find her, Mrs. Katz, Larnell said. I will not let you down. It was getting dark. And at first, Mrs. Katz and Larnell looked around their building. And then they went everywhere in the neighborhood. They left notes on the doors, telephone poles, and fences. They asked everyone who lived nearby, but no one had seen little Tush. That night it stormed. There was rain. Man, it was an awful, awful rain. Mrs. Katz hardly slept as she thought about her little Ketelea. I might be pronouncing that wrong. She's such a person, she whispered. Larnell worried most of the night, too. What will Mrs. Katz do, he thought. Please, God, please bring that little cat back to her, he said softly into his pillow. A loud knock on the front door awoke Mrs. Katz. It was Larnell's father and two neighbors. Is this yours? They asked. My boobale, my little Ketelea, Mrs. Katz exclaimed. We found her in the back alley, soaking wet and super hungry, Mrs. Dermore said. Thank you, Mrs. Katz said as she took Tush into her arms. After a while, Tush no longer had the least desire to go outside again. She slept a lot, even when Larnell came over to play with her. It was my Aunt Havila's Passover Sedar that I met Myron. Did you know that? Mrs. Katz asked as she looked at Larnell. What good times they were, with lots of family. But now it's just me, she said softly. Could I have Passover dinner with you? Asked Larnell. I thought you would never ask, she exclaimed as she hugged him close. Such a petter I'll prepare for you. Passover is a time for good food, Mrs. Katz shouted as they edged their way through the crowd in the deli. Like your people, my people were slaves too. They lived in a country where they didn't want to be. They wanted freedom so much that they prayed to God to help them, so he sent an angel that brought death and sadness to the houses of our captors. But the angel did not visit the houses of my people. How did the angel know where the Jews lived? Larnell asked. They marked the doors, and then the angel passed over. Passed over, Larnell. That's why we call this time of celebration Passover. So Larnell, we have a big feast to celebrate, but we also remember those who had to suffer so we could be free, Mrs. Katz said. Part of the dinner is sad, and part of it is happy. As Larnell helped get out the linens and china, Mrs. Katz said, You see this tablecloth? This was our wedding chupa, our canopy. For all these years, we've used it for holy days and celebrations. How come you have so many different dishes? Larnell asked. Because some Jews don't eat dairy and meat off the same dishes, she said. When they sat down to siddur together, Mrs. Katz lit 2 candles and waved her hands over them. She read from her book and said her prayers, and then said, "Let the feast begin." They drank red wine and water. They ate bitter herbs and lamb and chicken. They also had gefilte fish and spicy chopped apples with potato pancakes. "This bread looks like a soda cracker," Larnell exclaimed. "We call it matzo, dear. We eat it at Passover. It's flat because there's no yeast in it, so it doesn't rise." "Larnell, I have hidden 1 piece of matzo here in the apartment. If you can find it, I have a surprise for you." The surprise was a hand-knit sweater that she had made just for him. The next day, Mrs. Katz yelled out her back window to Larnell's apartment, "Come quickly! Something wonderful!" Larnell and his mom and dad rushed to her door. The angel of death passed over, but the angel of life didn't. Mazel tov, Tush. 4 babies. At last I am a booby. Booby? Great-grandma? Great-grandma? I don't... Booby. As the years passed, Mrs. Katz, Tush, and her descendants became a part of Larnell's family. There were graduations, weddings, new babies, and finally a Kaddish. Larnell stood in front of the headstone. He read from her book. He placed a small rock on top of her headstone. Ooh, my bad. And then he, his wife, and their children read the inscription together. "Mrs. Katz, our boobay, such a person." Woo! I haven't read this book in a long time. Oh, that is the end of Mrs. Katz and Tush. Before the end of the school year, my plan is to read the rest of my Patricia Polacco books for you guys because I want you to fall in love with her stories just as much as I have. Have a great day, and I miss you all.